Tom had driven the same bus route for 15 years, but no passenger intrigued him more than the silent woman in seat 12B. Margaret never missed a day, never spoke a word, just rode for exactly 6 stops before disappearing into the city. When she suddenly vanished, Tom broke every company rule to find out why. The truth behind her daily journey was more shocking than anyone could imagine. What Tom didn't know was that Margaret's daily journey wasn't what it seemed. In fact, the truth was so extraordinary that when he finally uncovered it, it would make him question everything he thought he knew about the passengers he'd been driving for years. The morning of March 15, 2024, started like any other for Tom Harrison. At exactly 6:30 a.m., he performed his routine inspection of bus route 47, checking mirrors, testing brakes, and ensuring every seat was clean. Tom had been driving this same route through downtown Seattle for 15 years, and he knew every pothole, every traffic light, and every regular passenger by heart. But there was one passenger who had captured his attention more than any other. Margaret Chen, seat 12B, every single weekday for the past 6 years. Tom couldn't pinpoint exactly when he'd first noticed her, but somewhere along the way, Margaret had become the most reliable part of his morning routine. Rain or shine, snow or blazing heat, she would be standing at the Maple Street stop at exactly 7:42 a.m., wearing her navy blue coat and carrying the same worn leather handbag. What made Margaret so intriguing wasn't just her punctuality, it was her complete silence. In 15 years of driving, Tom had seen it all. Chatty commuters who treated the bus like their personal talk show, business executives shouting into phones, students cramming for exams, elderly passengers who shared life stories with anyone willing to listen. But Margaret, she never spoke a word to anyone. She would board the bus with a polite nod, always having her exact fare ready. She would walk directly to seat 12B, never 12A, never 13B. Always the same window seat on the right side. She would sit with perfect posture, hands folded in her lap, staring out the window as Seattle's urban landscape rolled by. And after exactly 6 stops at the Monroe Street intersection, she would rise, walk to the front, and exit with another polite nod. For 6 years, this routine had never varied. Not once. Tom found himself looking forward to seeing her each morning, though he couldn't explain why. Maybe it was the mystery of her silence, or perhaps the reliability in an unpredictable world. Whatever it was, Margaret had become the heartbeat of his morning route. But March 15th was different. As Tom pulled up to the Maple Street stop at 7:42 a.m., he automatically looked for the familiar figure in the navy coat. The usual crowd of morning commuters was there. Jerry with his coffee and newspaper, the young mother with her twin toddlers, the group of college students clutching oversized coffee cups, but no Margaret. Tom waited the standard 30 seconds, scanning the sidewalk. Maybe she was running late. In 6 years, Margaret had never been late, but there was always a first time. He waited another 15 seconds, then reluctantly closed the doors and pulled away from the curb. Something felt wrong. As he continued the route, Tom couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in his chest. He found himself glancing in the rearview mirror at seat 12B, empty for the first time in over 2,000 days. The absence felt almost physical, like a missing tooth you can't stop probing with your tongue. But Tom told himself to be reasonable. People got sick. People had emergencies. People missed buses. It was perfectly normal. Except nothing about Margaret had ever been normal. The next morning, Tom arrived at his usual time, but this time he found himself actively hoping to see that navy blue coat. As he approached the Maple Street stop, his eyes immediately searched the crowd. No Margaret. Day 3, still no Margaret. By the 4th day, Tom's concern had shifted into something deeper. This wasn't just a sick day or a brief emergency. Something was seriously wrong. Tom had never spoken to Margaret beyond their polite nods, but after 6 years, he felt he knew her in some strange way. He knew she preferred the right side of the bus because she always looked out that window. He knew she carried herself with quiet dignity despite her simple clothing. He knew she was punctual to the second, organized and respectful. And he knew that whatever had happened to disrupt her routine must be significant. On the fifth morning without Margaret, Tom made a decision that went against every company policy he'd ever learned. He was going to find out what happened to her. During his lunch break, Tom drove his personal car to Monroe Street, where Margaret always got off the bus. It was a busy intersection in the heart of Seattle's business district, surrounded by office buildings, restaurants, and shops. Tom parked and began walking, though he realized he had no idea what he was looking for. Where did Margaret go after getting off the bus? In 6 years of watching her exit, he'd never seen which direction she walked. She would step off, the bus would pull away, and that was the end of his knowledge of her daily journey. Tom spent an hour walking up and down Monroe Street, peering into office building lobbies, checking restaurant windows, looking for any sign of the woman who had become such a fixture in his routine. But Seattle was a city of hundreds of thousands of people, and finding one quiet woman seemed impossible. That evening, Tom did something he'd never done in 15 years of driving. He accessed the passenger database. Technically, drivers weren't supposed to look up passenger information unless there was an official incident report. But Tom's concern for Margaret overrode his respect for company policy. Using his login credentials, he searched for any passenger records associated with Route 47 and the Maple Street stop. What he found made his blood run cold. There was no passenger named Margaret Chen in the system. Tom stared at the screen, convinced he'd made an error. He tried different spellings, different first names, different variations. He searched by stop locations, by route numbers, by date ranges. Nothing. According to Metro Transit's records, no one named Margaret Chen had ever been a regular passenger on Route 47. But that was impossible. Tom had seen her with his own eyes every single day for 6 years. She paid her fare. She sat in seat 12B. She was real, wasn't she? Tom left work that night with his mind racing. How could someone ride the same bus for 6 years without appearing in any passenger database? Even people who paid cash fares were recorded in the system's passenger count logs, unless Margaret had been paying in a way that didn't register in the official system. The next morning, Tom arrived at work early and went straight to his supervisor, Janet Mills. Janet had been with Metro Transit for 25 years and knew every policy, every procedure, and every trick in the book. "Janet," Tom said, trying to keep his voice casual. "Hypothetically speaking, how could someone ride the bus regularly without showing up in passenger records?" Janet looked up from her coffee and raised an eyebrow. "That's an odd question, Tom. Why do you ask?" Tom hesitated. How could he explain his obsession with a passenger who apparently didn't exist? "Just curious about system security." Janet studied his face for a moment, then shrugged. "Well, there are a few ways. Someone could use counterfeit passes, though our scanners are pretty good at detecting those. They could have a special transit card that doesn't register in the standard passenger database, like cards issued to undercover transit police or federal agents. Or," she paused, looking thoughtful. "Or what?" Tom prompted. "Well, there are some special programs for vulnerable populations. Homeless individuals, people in witness protection, certain categories of federal employees or their families. Those passengers sometimes have cards that register differently in our system for privacy and safety reasons." Tom felt his heart rate increase. What kind of different registration? Their records might be stored in a separate, secure database that regular drivers can't access. From our perspective, they'd appear to be paying customers, but their information wouldn't show up in standard searches. That afternoon, Tom couldn't concentrate on his driving. The possibility that Margaret was involved in some kind of federal program, witness protection, or other classified situation made her disappearance even more ominous. But it also gave him a new lead. If Margaret was part of a special program, someone at Metro Transit would have records. Someone with higher clearance than a regular bus driver. Tom waited until the end of his shift, then approached Janet again. "Janet, I need to ask you about something, and I need you to keep this confidential." Janet's expression grew serious. "What's going on, Tom?" Tom took a deep breath and told her everything. About Margaret, her 6-year routine, her sudden disappearance, and his inability to find any record of her in the passenger database. When he finished, Janet was quiet for a long moment. "Tom," she said finally, "are you absolutely certain about this passenger? 6 years? Same seat? Never missed a day?" "Absolutely certain. I could describe her clothing, her handbag, the exact way she held her hands in her lap. She was more reliable than my alarm clock." Janet frowned. "This is unusual. Let me make some calls." The next morning, Janet called Tom into her office before his shift began. Her expression was grim. "Tom, I've made some inquiries about your Margaret Chen. What I found is complicated." She handed him a manila folder marked confidential. "Before you open that, I need you to understand something. This information is classified, and sharing it with anyone could result in federal charges. Do you understand?" Tom nodded, his hands trembling slightly as he took the folder. Inside was a single photograph and a brief document. The photograph showed Margaret, but the name beneath it read Dr. Sarah Kimura. Tom's eyes widened as he read the document. Dr. Sarah Kimura, age 47, had been a research scientist at the Centers for Disease Control. 3 years ago, she had discovered evidence of a potential bioterror plot involving contaminated water supplies in major U.S. cities. But before she could report her findings, Dr. Kimura had realized that the plot originated from within her own research facility. Someone she trusted, someone with high-level access, was planning to use CDC resources to carry out an attack that could kill millions. Dr. Kimura had managed to copy crucial evidence before her discovery was detected. Knowing her life was in danger, she had contacted the FBI and entered witness protection. For the past 3 years, she had been living under the identity Margaret Chen, following strict protocols designed to keep her safe until the investigation could be completed and the terrorists apprehended. Dr. Kimura was supposed to deliver the evidence to a secure FBI facility the day she disappeared. We believe she may have been carrying it with her when she was taken. The weight of the situation hit Tom like a physical blow. The quiet woman who had been such a comforting presence in his daily routine was actually a hero carrying evidence that could save millions of lives. And now she was missing, possibly dead. "What can I do?" Tom asked. "Keep driving your route. If Dr. Kimura is still alive, if she manages to escape, she might try to return to familiar territory. Your bus route represents safety and routine to her. If she surfaces, you'll be the first to know." For the next week, Tom drove Route 47 with a new intensity. Every stop, every passenger, every shadow in his peripheral vision could be significant. He found himself memorizing faces, noting unusual behavior, watching for any sign of Margaret or the mysterious man with the baseball cap. But days passed with no sign of either. It was during his afternoon route that Tom noticed something unusual. A homeless woman was sitting at the Monroe Street bus stop, the same stop where Margaret always got off. There were plenty of homeless individuals in Seattle, and they often used bus stops for temporary shelter, so this wasn't inherently suspicious. But something about this woman made Tom look twice. She was wearing layers of mismatched clothing and a knit cap pulled low over her face, but her posture was too straight, too controlled, and when she glanced up at the approaching bus, Tom caught a glimpse of her eyes, Margaret's eyes. Tom's heart began racing. He pulled up to the stop and opened the doors, trying to act normal as the homeless woman approached. She climbed aboard slowly, keeping her head down, and placed exact fare in the box. As she passed him, she whispered 2 words so quietly that Tom almost missed them. "Help me." Margaret shuffled to the back of the bus and sat in the corner, hunched over like she was sleeping. Tom continued his route, his mind racing. How could he help her without alerting any potential surveillance? How could he communicate with her without endangering both of them? At the next stop, Tom made a decision. As passengers boarded and exited, he quietly moved to the back of the bus under the pretense of checking for forgotten items. "Margaret," he whispered, kneeling beside her seat. "It's Tom. The FBI is looking for you." She looked up, and Tom was shocked by her appearance. Her face was gaunt, her eyes hollow with exhaustion and fear. There were bruises on her cheek that her makeup couldn't quite hide. "They found me," she whispered. "I escaped, but they're still looking. I have what the FBI needs, but I don't know who to trust." Tom glanced around the bus. Most passengers were absorbed in their phones or staring out windows, but he couldn't be sure they weren't being watched. "Where's the evidence?" he asked quietly. Margaret's eyes darted to her layers of clothing. "Hidden, safe." "But Tom, these people, they have resources, government connections. They knew about my protection detail, my safe houses. Someone on the inside is helping them." A chill ran down Tom's spine. If the terrorists had federal connections, then even contacting Agent Torres might be dangerous. "What do you need me to do?" "I need to get to a secure location, but not through official channels. Somewhere they wouldn't think to look." Margaret paused, thinking. "The bus depot, after hours, when it's empty. Can you get me in?" Tom nodded. He had keys and security codes for the depot. All drivers did for emergency situations. "Tonight, after the last route, I'll leave a side door unlocked. But Margaret, once we do this, there's no going back. If these people are as connected as you say..." "I know." Margaret's voice was steady despite her fear. "But Tom, if we don't do this, thousands of people will die, maybe hundreds of thousands." That evening, Tom completed his final route of the day with his nerves on edge. Every passenger seemed suspicious. Every car that followed too closely might be surveillance, but he saw no sign of Margaret or anyone who might be looking for her. At the depot, Tom went through his usual end-of-shift routine, but with one crucial difference. Before leaving through the main entrance, he slipped out a side door and disabled the alarm sensor, leaving the door unlocked. He drove home, had dinner, and waited. At 11:30 p.m., he returned to the depot. Margaret was waiting in the shadows beside the unlocked door, still wearing her homeless disguise, but looking slightly less vulnerable now that she was off the streets. "Thank you," she said as Tom led her inside. "I wasn't sure you'd come. In 6 years, you never missed our bus. I wasn't about to miss this." Tom led her through the darkened depot to his supervisor's office, which had a secure computer terminal and a landline phone that wasn't connected to the main metro transit system. "From here, you can contact whoever you trust," Tom said. "But Margaret, I have to ask, why didn't you just go to the police? Why involve me?" Margaret was quiet for a moment, removing layers of clothing to reveal a small waterproof container strapped to her chest. "Because in 6 years of riding your bus, you were the only person who ever really saw me. Not Dr. Sarah Kimura, the scientist. Not Margaret Chen, the witness. Just me. You cared enough to notice when I disappeared, and you cared enough to try to find me." She opened the container, revealing vials of clear liquid and a thick folder of documents. These samples contain the bioweapon they're planning to use. The documents detail the entire plot, targets, timeline, personnel involved. With this evidence, the FBI can stop the attack and arrest everyone involved. Tom stared at the vials, realizing he was looking at one of the most dangerous substances on Earth. "But there's something else," Margaret continued. "Something I discovered during my captivity. The attack isn't planned for months from now, like the FBI thinks. It's planned for tomorrow, during the morning commute." Tom's blood went cold. "Tomorrow? Where?" "Multiple transit systems simultaneously. Buses, trains, ferry terminals. They're going to release aerosol versions of this agent during rush hour in 5 major cities. The death toll could reach into the millions." Margaret picked up the phone and began dialing a number she'd memorized. "Agent Torres, this is Dr. Sarah Kimura. I'm alive, I have the evidence, and you need to listen very carefully because we have less than 8 hours to prevent a catastrophe." The next several hours passed in a blur of federal agents, hazmat teams, and coordinated law enforcement operations. The bus depot was transformed into a temporary command center, as agencies worked to identify and neutralize the terrorist cells in 5 cities. Tom found himself in the surreal position of being debriefed by FBI agents while sitting in the break room where he normally ate his lunch. By dawn, the operation was over. 37 individuals had been arrested across the 5 target cities, including 3 high-ranking government officials who had been providing intelligence to the terrorist organization. The bioweapon samples had been secured and would be destroyed under military supervision. The attack that could have killed millions had been prevented with hours to spare. As the federal agents packed up their equipment and prepared to leave the depot, Agent Torres approached Tom. "Mr. Harrison, what you did tonight, there aren't words for it. You saved countless lives." Tom shook his head. "I just drove a bus and unlocked a door. Margaret is the hero here." Agent Torres smiled. "Dr. Kimura said you'd say something like that. She also said to give you this." She handed Tom an envelope with his name written in Margaret's careful handwriting. Inside was a simple note. "Dear Tom, thank you for seeing me every day for 6 years, even when I couldn't see myself. Thank you for noticing when I was gone, and thank you for helping me come home. You'll probably never see me again. My identity will change. My life will move to a new city, a new routine. But I want you to know that for 6 years, your bus was the safest part of my day. In a world where I had to hide who I was and live in constant fear, those few minutes in seat 12B were the only time I felt normal. You gave me that gift without even knowing it. The FBI tells me you'll receive a commendation for your role in stopping the attack. But I doubt that means much to a man who was just doing what he felt was right. So instead, I want to give you something that I hope means more. The knowledge that your kindness matters. Your attention to the people around you matters. Your willingness to care about a stranger who never even spoke to you matters. In my new life, wherever I go, I'll remember the bus driver who noticed when one passenger didn't show up. And I'll try to be that kind of person too. Someone who pays attention, someone who cares, someone who acts when action is needed. Thank you for being exactly who you are. With gratitude and friendship, Margaret." Tom read the note twice, then carefully folded it and put it in his wallet. The next morning, he began his route as usual. As he pulled up to the Maple Street stop at 7:42 a.m., he automatically glanced at the waiting passengers. No Margaret. There would never be Margaret again. But for the first time in 8 days, seat 12B didn't feel empty. It felt like a reminder of something important, that the small kindnesses we show to strangers, the attention we pay to the people around us, the care we invest in our daily interactions, can ripple outward in ways we never imagined. Tom smiled and opened the doors, ready to begin another day of noticing, caring, and driving people safely to wherever they needed to go. Because sometimes, that's all it takes to save the world. But what Tom didn't realize was that Margaret's story was far from over. 3 weeks after the terrorist plot had been foiled, something unexpected happened that would give their story one final remarkable twist. Tom was driving his usual morning route when his supervisor, Janet, called him on the radio. "Tom, we've got a special passenger request for Route 47 today. VIP transport. Just thought you should know." Tom frowned. In 15 years, he'd never had a VIP passenger request. "What kind of VIP?" "Federal witness relocation. Can't say more over the radio, but they'll board at Pine Street at 8:15. Tom's heart began to race. Could it be? When he pulled up to Pine Street, a woman in a simple gray coat and sunglasses approached the bus. She was different. Shorter hair, different clothes, even walked differently. But when she looked up and smiled, Tom knew immediately. It was Margaret. She boarded quietly, paid her fare, and to Tom's amazement, walked directly to seat 12B. As she sat down, she caught his eye in the rearview mirror and gave him the same polite nod she'd given him every day for 6 years. But this time, she spoke. "Good morning, Tom." Her voice was soft, warm, and carried a weight of gratitude that made Tom's throat tighten with emotion. For the next 6 stops, exactly 6 stops, Just like old times, Margaret rode in her familiar seat. But this journey was different. Instead of staring silently out the window, she seemed to be savoring every moment, watching the city pass by like she was seeing it for the first time. When they reached Monroe Street, Margaret rose and walked to the front of the bus, but instead of simply exiting, she paused beside Tom's seat. "I wanted to ride the route one more time," she said quietly, "to say goodbye properly." Tom nodded, not trusting himself to speak. "Tom, I need you to know something. In my new life, wherever they send me, I'll never forget what you taught me." "What did I teach you?" Tom managed to ask. Margaret smiled, and for a moment, she looked exactly like the woman who had sat in seat 12B for 6 years. "You taught me that ordinary people doing ordinary things with extraordinary kindness can change the world." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small wrapped package. "This is for you. Don't open it until I'm gone." Before Tom could respond, Margaret stepped off the bus. But unlike every other time over the past 6 years, this time she turned back and waved. Tom watched through his side mirror as a black sedan pulled up to collect her, watched as she disappeared into her new life, her new identity, her new chance at safety. Tom looked down at the package in his hands. Inside was a small wooden carving, a miniature bus, handcrafted with incredible detail. Every window, every tire, even tiny passenger figures visible through the windows, and attached was a note for the driver who always noticed his passengers. "This bus has 47 seats, each one representing a life you've touched. In seat 12B, there's a special figure. That's me, riding safely because of your kindness. Thank you for 6 years of feeling human. Your friend, Margaret." Tom examined the tiny bus more closely and found seat 12B. Sure enough, there was a small figure of a woman, carved with such detail that it was unmistakably Margaret. But as Tom continued to study the carving, he realized something extraordinary. Each of the 47 passenger figures was unique. Each one told a story. There was an elderly man with a cane. Tom recognized him as Mr. Peterson, who rode the bus to his dialysis appointments. There was a young mother with 2 children, the Gonzalez family, who Tom always made sure had priority seating. Margaret had carved not just her own story, but the stories of dozens of passengers she'd observed during her 6 years of silence. She'd been watching, remembering, honoring the small human dramas that played out on bus route 47 every single day. Tom realized that while he'd been noticing Margaret, she'd been noticing everyone else. That afternoon, Tom made an unprecedented decision. For the first time in 15 years, he requested a meeting with the Metro Transit District Manager. "Sir," Tom said, sitting across from District Manager Robert Chen, no relation to Margaret's alias, "I want to propose something that might sound unusual." Tom told him about Margaret, not the classified details, but the human story. A passenger who rode for 6 years, never missed a day, and how her disappearance had made him realize how many people depended on public transit, not just for transportation, but for connection, routine, and dignity. "What are you proposing, Tom?" Tom pulled out Margaret's wooden carving. "I want to start a program, the 47 Seats Initiative, a way to recognize and honor the passengers who make our routes more than just transportation, who make them communities." District Manager Chen examined the intricate carving, his eyes widening as he took in the detail and craftsmanship. "Every month," Tom continued, "drivers could nominate passengers who exemplify the spirit of community, not for any grand gestures, but for the small kindnesses. The passenger who always gives up their seat for someone who needs it more, the person who helps others with their groceries, the individual who brightens everyone's day with a simple smile." And what would this recognition involve? A small ceremony at each depot, a certificate of appreciation, maybe a small gift, nothing expensive, just something to say, "We see you, we value you, you matter," and most importantly, a reminder to drivers that we're not just moving people from point A to point B, we're part of their daily lives. District Manager Chen was quiet for a long moment, turning the wooden bus over in his hands. Tom, in my 20 years with Metro Transit, I've never heard a proposal quite like this. It's humanistic, personal, not really what we usually do. Tom's heart sank, but Chen continued, which is exactly why we should do it. When can you have a full proposal on my desk? 6 months later, the 47 Seats initiative had been implemented across the entire Metro Transit system. What started as Tom's tribute to Margaret had grown into a citywide program that transformed how drivers and passengers interacted. Tom kept Margaret's wooden bus on his dashboard, and passengers often asked about it. He would tell them it was a reminder that every person who boarded his bus had a story worth noticing. Meanwhile, Margaret's real impact continued to ripple outward in ways Tom would never know. The bioterror plot she'd helped foil had been part of a larger international network. The evidence she'd provided didn't just stop one attack. It led to the dismantling of terror cells across 3 continents. Intelligence agencies used her information to prevent 17 separate attacks over the following 2 years. Dr. Sarah Kimura, in her new identity in a new city, continued her scientific work under federal protection. But she also volunteered at a local community center, teaching science to underprivileged children. When parents asked why she was so dedicated to helping kids who weren't her own, she would say, "Because a kind stranger once helped me when I couldn't help myself." She never mentioned the bus driver who noticed when she didn't show up, but she thought about Tom every day. 1 year after Margaret's final bus ride, Tom received an unexpected package at the depot. No return address, postmarked from a city he'd never visited. Inside was another wooden carving. This time, a small schoolhouse filled with children, and a note. "Dear Tom, you can't know this, but your kindness is still saving lives. The children I teach will grow up to be scientists, doctors, teachers, and maybe even bus drivers who notice when someone needs help. You planted a seed of humanity in a scared woman sitting in seat 12B. That seed is now growing in dozens of other lives. Thank you for watering it every day for 6 years, just by being yourself. Your grateful friend." Tom placed the schoolhouse carving next to the bus on his dashboard. Passengers began to notice the growing collection, and many started sharing their own stories of kindness they'd witnessed or experienced on public transit. Soon, other drivers were displaying their own collections of passenger gifts and mementos. The buses themselves became mobile galleries, celebrating human connection. 5 years after Margaret's disappearance, Tom was invited to speak at a national transit conference about the 47 Seats initiative. Standing before hundreds of transportation professionals, he held up the original wooden bus carving. "This was made by a passenger I knew only as Margaret," he told the audience. "For 6 years, she rode my bus in complete silence. I thought I was just driving her to work, but what I didn't know was that she was carrying the weight of saving the world." Tom paused, looking out at the audience of drivers, mechanics, supervisors, and administrators. "Every day we carry people who are carrying burdens we can't see. Some are going to jobs they hate to support families they love. Some are traveling to say goodbye to dying relatives. Some are running from danger or toward hope, or just trying to hold their lives together one bus ride at a time." He held up the carving again. "Margaret taught me that our job isn't just to drive buses. Our job is to be the reliable constant in someone's uncertain world, to be the person who notices when they don't show up, to be the safe space in their dangerous day." The audience was completely silent. "So when you go back to your roots tomorrow, remember, you're not just a driver. You're someone's Margaret. You're someone's safe harbor. You're someone's reminder that kindness still exists in the world." The standing ovation lasted for 5 minutes. After the conference, Tom was approached by a documentary filmmaker who wanted to tell Margaret's story. Tom politely declined, explaining that some stories were too important to exploit, even with good intentions. But he did agree to something else. Working with Metro Transit and the filmmaker, Tom helped create a training program for new drivers called the Margaret Protocol. teaching transit employees to recognize signs that passengers might be in distress, danger, or need of help. The program spread to transit systems across the country and eventually around the world. 10 years after Margaret's final ride, Tom was preparing for retirement when he received one last package. This one contained a wooden carving of a globe, with tiny buses circling it like satellites. The note read, "Dear Tom, I'm writing this on the 10th anniversary of the day you saved my life and the lives of millions of others. But I'm not writing to thank you again. I'm writing to tell you what came after. The kindness you showed a frightened woman in seat 12B has now circled the globe. The 47 Seats initiative exists in 47 countries. The Margaret Protocol has helped identify and assist over 10,000 people in crisis. But more than that, you changed the way people think about strangers. You proved that paying attention to each other isn't just nice, it's necessary. I'm a grandmother now, living safely under my new name. My daughter is a teacher, inspired by stories I told her about a bus driver who noticed when people needed help. My son works for an organization that helps people in witness protection rebuild their lives. Your kindness didn't just save lives. It created new ones. Thank you for showing the world that ordinary heroes drive buses, teach children, serve coffee, deliver mail, and do 1,000 other everyday jobs that keep our society running. Thank you for proving that the most important superpower is simply caring about each other. With endless gratitude and love, your eternal passenger." On Tom's last day of driving Route 47, something extraordinary happened. At the Maple Street stop, at exactly 7:42 a.m., a woman in a navy blue coat boarded the bus. It wasn't Margaret. Tom knew it wasn't Margaret, but she walked directly to seat 12B, sat with perfect posture, and rode for exactly 6 stops before getting off at Monroe Street. As she exited, she handed Tom a note, keeping the seat warm for someone who mattered. Tom later learned that several of Margaret's fellow passengers from years past had organized this tribute. For his final week of driving, volunteers had taken turns riding in seat 12B, each one honoring the memory of the woman who had taught them all that silence could be its own form of courage. On his very last day, the passenger in seat 12B was a young girl, maybe 7 years old, accompanied by her grandmother. As they got off the bus, the grandmother smiled at Tom. "My granddaughter wanted to sit there," she said. She heard about Margaret's story and said she wanted to be brave like her when she grows up. The little girl looked up at Tom with serious eyes. "When I'm old enough to ride the bus by myself, I'll remember to notice if the driver seems sad, and I'll try to make them smile." Tom knelt down to the girl's level. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Margaret," the girl said proudly. "I was named after a hero." As Tom drove the empty bus back to the depot for the last time, he realized that Margaret's story, their story, would continue long after he was gone. Every driver who learned to notice their passengers, every passenger who learned to care about strangers, every small act of kindness inspired by a woman who rode in silence for 6 years, all of it was Margaret's legacy. And in a way, it was his legacy too. That evening, Tom carefully packed away his collection of wooden carvings, each one representing a life touched by Margaret's courage and his own simple decision to pay attention. But he left one carving on the dashboard of his replacement bus, the original wooden bus with its 47 passenger figures. Attached was a note for the new driver. "This bus belonged to a passenger named Margaret. She taught me that the most important part of driving isn't reaching the destination. It's noticing who's along for the ride. Take care of your passengers. One of them might be carrying the weight of the world." The new driver, a young woman named Sarah, read the note and carefully placed the carving in a place of honor on her dashboard. The next morning, at exactly 7:42 a.m., she pulled up to the Maple Street stop and opened her doors, ready to begin her own journey of noticing, caring, and discovering that sometimes The most ordinary job can lead to the most extraordinary outcomes. Because Margaret's seat 12B, would never really be empty. It would always be filled with the reminder that kindness notices everything, that silence can speak volumes, and that the person sitting quietly in the corner might just be the one who saves the world. And every morning at 7:42 a.m., somewhere in the world, a bus driver opens their doors and looks for their Margaret, the passenger who will teach them that the smallest acts of human decency can ripple outward to change everything. The route continues, the journey never ends, and seat 12B remains a testament to the truth that ordinary people, paying attention to each other, can accomplish extraordinary things.